Hello, everybody. I am at the play-by-play sports broadcasting camps in Philadelphia, or Villanova, Pennsylvania, I should say, their Philadelphia camp. However, we need to make an urgent episode of Wiz Talk with Chase because Jordan Poole is no longer a Washington Wizard. I repeat, Jordan Poole is no longer a Washington Wizard. He is in New Orleans. We're going to break down all the details from that trade that has CJ McCollum coming over to Washington, kind of having him replace his presence. The Wizards were not able to gain a first-round pick out of the trade. However, they have number 6 tonight and number 18 tonight, and you don't know if they're going to be making any moves. We're going to talk about all that and more with a special guest, Matthew Heiserman, joining us once we get to talk about the Wizards' 6th overall pick. Let's cue the intro. So, ladies and gentlemen, again, we have made it to draft night. The draft once again taking place in Brooklyn, New York. It looks like the Wizards kind of have a few options of who they're going to take or a few guys that are going to be there, and that has changed since we talked about some guys that Washington could take at 6th overall in a previous episode, and we're going to get into that in a few minutes. But real quick, we have to talk about this Jordan Poole trade. For those who do not know, Jordan Poole is no longer a Washington Wizard. We heard the rumors of possibly Poole being dealt to a different team. Now we have actually seen that come to fruition. He is now going to be in New Orleans, a really funky situation there where you traded Brandon Ingram to save salary, yet you gain salary long-term by adding on Jordan Poole. They also have an injured DeJounte Murray. Zion Williamson has some allegations off the court, let's just put it that way. So their situation is perhaps the most unique, but not in a good way, across the entire NBA. Right now, if you're looking at this trade, here are the full details. Jordan Poole, Saddiq Bey, and the Wizards' 40th pick are going to New Orleans. The Washington Wizards, they're getting in exchange CJ McCollum on a 1-year deal, Kelly Olynyk on a 1-year deal, and a future second-round pick. A lot of Wizards fans were at first underwhelmed by what they got in exchange for a guy like Jordan Poole. This is a guy who a lot of fans were down on after his first season. He had a really bad first year in DC, considering he had been a championship, caliber, a championship type player in Golden State. He did win that. He led the league in free throw percentage in that championship year, then followed it up with 20 points a game on decent free throw shooting again. So people were disappointed. And when that dropped down to 17.4 points per game, he wasn't able to start down the stretch. But now, once again, he's in the starting lineup, playing great basketball. And once again, you are seeing Jordan Poole kind of come into his own here. Played 68 games last year, 20.5 points a game, 38% three-point shooting, 88% from the free throw line. That's the type of guy he is, but now he is gone. A lot of fans of the Wizards do hate the trade because this is a guy in Jordan Poole who had kind of been beloved in just kind of this Washington Wizards community in a sense. And he really blossomed into an incredible scorer, but still has 2 years on that max contract. He signed $31.8 annually on that deal. And the Wizards, what they're essentially doing is, yes, I would have loved to have gotten a first-round pick for a guy like Jordan Poole. Considering what the asking price is in today's NBA, Washington could have very easily added kind of an end-of-the-first-round type pick, and you never know where you can get out of that. Washington got Keyshawn George when you used 26 in the second-round pick to get to 24 last year. So you never know what you're going to get kind of in the latter stages of the draft. I would have loved to have seen the Wizards kind of add a first-round pick or acquire a first-round pick from this Jordan Poole trade. But what this is doing is it is a salary dump. And if you're the Washington Wizards, you say, look, Jordan Poole has got 2 years left on his deal. The Wizards are not contenders in the next 2 years. So what you're saying is we don't really need that. If not, we're going to have to come up with contract negotiations. Anyway, we don't need him on this roster. Instead, let's trade him and Saddiq Bey, both under contract for multiple years, for guys who have expiring contracts this coming year, because we've spoken about it on the show. This team, not only do they have money, they have a lot of money to spend next summer. We're talking over $100 million, upwards of 3 digits of millions. That is a lot. That is a lot. So that is 9 digits total in cap space. And that is a lot because next year, Corey Kispert is going to be the highest paid player on the team. You're going to get Chris Middleton's $33.3 million player option off the books. Marcus Smart's contract off the books. The CJ McCollum contract off the books. But in the meantime, they're great mentors. Chris Middleton and CJ McCollum have mastered the art of shooting the mid-range. Bub Carrington's going to need that. Keyshawn George is going to need that. How about Marcus Smart? You want a guy to play with tenacity. You want a guy like Bub Carrington, maybe a guy you're going to draft. These guys can help develop and then also say, okay, bye-bye. I hope the door doesn't hit your you-know-what on the way out because now you want to try to contend. That's kind of the Washington Wizards motto, and I love it because how long are you just going to be like this? The Wizards are once again going to be one of the NBA's worst teams this year, barring a crazy kind of sudden change in what their timeline is going to be, because that's that's just what they want to do. They want to get another top draft pick and then hope they have their core with their $100+ million to spend to add a guy like a Jaden Ivey if he's available, or a Jaren Jackson Jr., heck, a Luka Doncic if he's there, a Kevin Durant if he's there, a guy of that nature, maybe a James Harden or LeBron James. You never know what can happen when you have over $100 million to spend in free agency next year. So at first, when I saw the trade and I saw Washington wasn't adding a first-round pick, it felt very mind-boggling that Washington would do a trade for a guy and when you're not getting a first-round pick in exchange. However, Kelly Olynyk and CJ McCollum, they'll do their due diligence this year. Jordan Poole's not going to play a part in your future championship team. You're swapping second-round picks and you're gaining more salary cap next year. To me, it's not a bad trade for the Pelicans, but to me, it is a good trade for the Wizards because Jordan Poole doesn't fit the timeline. And I mentioned you're going to need to make up room in this kind of guard rotation, if you will, for guys, if you're going to have a guy like A.J. Johnson, a guy like Bob Carrington, and if you draft one tonight, you're going to want that flexibility. And now with Jordan Poole gone, you now have that flexibility with your own hands. So I hate creating trades. At first, I saw this trade. I'll give the Wizards a C. I more personally like it as like a B+. I still think that the fact that they couldn't get a first-round pick for a scorer of Poole's caliber in today's NBA, I'm not going to give them an A, but it's all going to come down to how they do in free agency next year, because if they don't do well in free agency, then this has all been a waste. So frankly, it's kind of a to be determined depending on how Washington allocates their remaining salary in next year's free agency, where then in the 2026-27 season, you're going to hope to contend and try to add some players to this core. But that core is still not finished. You have Bilal Coulibaly, who you traded up to get in the 2023 draft. You have 4 first-round picks from last year. The 3 you drafted in Alex Sarr, Bob Carrington, and Keyshawn George, as well as A.J. Johnson, the 22nd pick who you got in the trade when you traded Kyle Kuzma to Milwaukee for Chris Middleton, A.J. Johnson in a future swap. And then now you're going to have this year's set of picks and next year's set of picks. Wizards have the number 6 overall pick and 18th, which is coming from Memphis for the deal that they did get with Memphis. And in the Marcus Smart trade, you took on the Marcus Smart salary. You gained a first-round pick. Didn't have to give up much to get it. Though that's going to kind of round out the Wizards core. At number 18, there are a few guys you could take. Please follow me. You can see it right there. X Chase Coburn at Cool Sports Kid, if you want to know a little bit about that. However, we're going to talk about number 6 overall, because that is where Washington could possibly add their future number 1, their future franchise player. And to do it, no one better to add to the show than Matthew Heiserman. Matthew, welcome to the show. We appreciate you joining us. And I know you have a ton of great insights on your channel, Highlight Habits. We appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely, Chase. I appreciate you having me on, and I look forward to talking some Wizards basketball.
Let's do it. Links to Matthew's work, whether it's his social media or his YouTube channel. YouTube channels is in the description. Matthew doing a lot of great things. You guys don't want to miss it. Obviously, you're a diehard Washington Wizards fan, as am I. We did this last year. We previewed the draft. This year, I think we're both better analysts. We both know this draft better. And I think the draft class as a whole was better. The wild card kind of being Ace Bailey. Speak to me on Ace and a few guys that you think Washington could take at 6th overall tonight.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the comparison between this year and last year, this one's a lot more interesting just because there's a lot more options for the Wizards at number 6. Last year, it was mainly Alex Sarr. We had a feeling Sarr wasn't going to go 1 to the Hawks. And I feel like we don't know where this draft's going to go. We don't know if there could be some trades. So it's going to be really interesting. Now, you mentioned Ace Bailey. And the thing that really jumps out to me is the fact that everybody's talking about his character issues, specifically when it comes to the fact that he wasn't working out with a lot of teams. Now, the thing that really I care about is he's shown that he is really interested in working with Washington. I know he's worked with them prior to the draft, and it just seems like he would like to be on this team. I don't see those character issues as much of a problem if this guy clearly wants to be a part of the squad, rather than maybe the 76ers, who he's opting to not work out with. And then when it comes to Ace Bailey as a player, he's really lengthy. He has over a 7-foot wingspan. And you know, it's just kind of crazy that this was a guy who was almost a consensus number 3 a little while ago, and now it looks like he's sliding down to number 6. That's potential you can't pass up on. And this is just an 18-year-old. This is a lot of expectations for an 18-year-old, but he has a lot of time to grow, and I would expect him to do big things on this Washington team.
Thank you, Matthew. Yeah, you're right. And I think a credible journalist, Ben Strober, who's one of the hosts of Locked On Wizards, he put this out about what Chris Miles said on 106.7 The Fan recently, and he said, quote, Ace Bailey tried to galvanize his teammates at Rutgers to work out with him at 5 a.m. His teammates were like, man, this guy's kind of crazy how hard he works on his game. Washington has the pieces in play to maximize his potential. This is a team who pushes their players to the limit. Guys like Draymond Green have talked about how they believe the system that Brian Keefe has put together is going to be great for this team long term, and I think that's wonderful, and I think that just shows that this Wizards team is going in the right direction. And if you don't believe in the character issues, some people are calling Ace Bailey the Shedeur Sanders of this draft. But if he really wants to go to Washington, he is a player with a ton of raw talent. Can he put it all together? That is kind of the big question, because a lot of people are saying, look, if this guy is as good as he is, he's playing with Dylan Harper, who not a lot of people are questioning. Why couldn't this team get to the NCAA tournament? But I wouldn't exactly blame it on him, because even though the talent is raw, this is a guy who put together 7 rebounds a game last year, a steal and a block per game, 17.5 points, 46% shooting from the field, and 35% shooting from 3 on 4.5 attempts per night. We're talking about a guy as if this guy is just pure raw talent, but this is a guy who still put together a great season at the collegiate level, and I think we're nitpicking a little bit, and because of the recent situations, we don't know if this is just a media play or whether this really is real. If Philadelphia doesn't decide to go in that direction and another team does not want to trade up, Ace Bailey, the Wizards should try to target him. But here is the issue. If you're not all in on Bailey, 2 weeks ago, people did not even know that Ace Bailey could possibly be an option for the Washington Wizards. We talked about their options in number 6. We did not mention Ace Bailey on there. That wasn't the hot topic then. Now that seems like a realistic factor. If Ace Bailey is there, do you take him, or do you go with a guy like Jeremiah Fierce, who I really love, or Matthew, your favorite guy, I know you're going to touch on real quick? Talk to us about Trey Johnson and why you think he could be a great option for the Washington Wizards, as it now seems Johnson's stock has fallen and he should be there at number 6.
Yeah, I mean, well, I'm going to answer your question first on who I'd rather go with. If they're both there, I'd probably rather go with Ace. I just think when you have a guy who was projected to go so high, Ace is a player where you look back on this a few years from now and you ask yourself, why didn't we take him? It was the obvious choice. He becomes a star. Why didn't we take him when he was on the table? That's the kind of situation this is. And going back to his character stuff that we were talking about, I think obviously this is something we all know, but it's something that we kind of maybe forget about every single year. People love clicks. People love to make narratives more than they really are, because no one's going to talk about Cooper Flag going to the Mavericks because it's not a narrative. People are going to talk about whatever is obviously going to get them views, and I think this is a perfect example of that. That's why Shedeur got so much attention leading up to the NFL draft. And when it comes to Trey Johnson, who I am a really big fan of, I mean, he's one of the best scorers, if not the best scorer in this draft. He led all freshmen in average points per game in college last season, just about 40% from 3, and that is just under 7 attempts, right? He's not scared to shoot the ball. Now, I think, especially for Wizards fans, we can kind of tie this back to Corey Kispert or Davis Bertans. They're very one-dimensional players in the sense that when their shot's not falling, you kind of look at them and you're asking yourself, what are they doing on this team, right? Like,
and you really get that vibe with Johnson? Because to me, I get that vibe with Knuckle because he can't create his own shot.
That's not where I'm going with this. That's not where I'm going with this. I'm saying we've seen both Kispert and Bertans have really cold stretches where they're not able to shoot, and they feel valueless. Where I was getting is the fact that Trey Johnson doesn't feel like one of those guys. Trey Johnson is a really good three-point shooter. That said, he's also able to score at all 3 levels. He can drive. He can shoot the mid-range. If his shots aren't falling, specifically from 3, he's able to rely on other aspects of his game, which is something you wouldn't see from some of those other guys that I mentioned earlier. And I just think overall he's a much better, well-rounded player that Washington can take advantage of. And, you know, after the Jordan Poole trade, it's clear that they want to take a guard. Now, that said, if Ace Bailey's there, I think you take the forward. It is what it is. But I think they are really interested in either Fierce or Trey Johnson. If they're there, one of those guys will most likely be there at this pick. You take that guard. I'm happy putting Bub Carrington at the point guard this year. That's not a problem to me. Maybe if you want to bring in a shooting guard, which is where Trey Johnson would play, I'd be happy to. I think that's a great selection for Washington.
And it's very interesting too, because if you don't want to draft for position or fit when you're in a position like Washington.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're not going to take two guards and you're not going to take two bigs. We've seen recent mocks. Yahoo had Derek Queen falling to 18th. I think it was CBS Sports who had McNeely at 18 for Washington. And then NBC Sports had Kasparis Yakuchonis there for the Wizards at 18th. So if they go in one of those directions, or I guess who they take at number 18, it will probably be the best player available, but it will probably be dependent on what kind of player you also got with your number 6 overall pick. And I think the other interesting factor is that you talk about Trey Johnson. He has that it factor. He's clutch. We saw that at the college level. And Jeremiah Fears brings that same tenacity, and he brings that same clutch factor, if you will, because that's the type of player that he is. So here's what I'm saying. I think that with the way this mock is going, Cooper Flagg and Dylan Harper are going to be the top 2 picks. Yeah. Philadelphia is the interesting one. Are you keeping your pick and taking VJ Edgecombe? It doesn't look like they're going to take Ace Bailey, or are you trading that pick? Is a team like Brooklyn trading up? Because that is the concern if you're Washington. Because if you're targeting Ace Bailey, Brooklyn has all the picks and their mothers to try and use it to trade here. And that should be very concerning for the Wizards, who don't have those same assets and probably shouldn't use those same assets to trade up what would be only 2 spots. So the Wizards are kind of playing the gambling game. Nonetheless, it doesn't look like Trey Johnson will be there. If Flagg and Harper go 1-2, or we're going to see Edgecombe also go in the top 5. And then you're going to see Jeremiah Fears or Ace Bailey go in the top 5 with Kudeppel. So we know it's going to be Flagg, Harper, Kudeppel, and Edgecombe in the top 5. Obviously, we don't know anything, but that's what we're expecting. That means the Wizards, without a doubt, are going to have one of Bailey or Fears to choose from to also look at Trey Johnson, kind of compare them and see which player they want to take. I don't think they're going to go the Trey Johnson route. I think they're going to go either the one that's available in Jeremiah Fears or Ace Bailey. And that's going to be all dependent on what happens in the trade market, because Utah is in love with Jeremiah Fears. And if he is there and they have the 5th pick, I find it very unlikely that they go in a different direction. If for some reason both of them are not on the board, I do go Trey Johnson, though that would kind of be the worst possible scenario. And I would try to stay away from Kudeppel and Kamal Malawach as much as possible, as we kind of talked about when I was previewing who they could get at the number 6 pick.
Now, I think one of the other things that is interesting when you're looking at Trey Johnson, especially compared to some of the other guys I mentioned for the Wizards earlier, it's not fair to compare him to Kispert. But just like, I'm going to make that comparison because they're both really good 3-point shooters, obviously. Kispert can't necessarily create his shots that well. He's a big catch and shoot kind of guy. Trey Johnson, also catch and shoot, but he can shoot off the dribble. He can create his own shots. He's great when it comes to pull up 3-pointers. And I think when you have a guy that can be a great shooter and facilitate the offense as well, that's what you really want. And that's the kind of guy that brings more than just an asset from beyond the arc.
And if you're the Wizards, you're taking upside. And that's why I think Bailey and Fears are great options for them. To me, Ace Bailey's kind of the wild card. We will see what happens. Are the off-the-court issues really real? Or is that something you're going to try to tweak with? We're going to have to see what happens. It's going to be a very interesting draft. Real quick before we wrap up, Matthew, what would be your ideal scenario for the Wizards? In your ideal world, kind of being realistic as well, who are you taking at 6 and who are you taking at 18?
Well, I mean, I think obviously it goes Cooper, Harper, Edgecombe, and then I would probably say Knippel Fears. So if that's the situation, no trades. I wouldn't be surprised if Brooklyn moves up, obviously. No trades. I would love to have Ace Bailey. If there's a trade, if Ace Bailey's off the board, if Fears, I'd say right now it's probably Ace Bailey at number 6, number 1 option. I'd be fine with Fears or Trey Johnson. If either of those guys are on the board and Bailey's not, that's a pick and choose situation. I wouldn't complain either way. 18, this isn't probably going to happen, but you said ideal situation. We saw it in the Yahoo mock draft from Kevin O'Connor, Derek Queen, Maryland center. Obviously, I'm from Maryland, so a nice little connection there. Maybe a little bit of bias, but I loved watching him during March Madness. And I think he would just be a player who, again, I'm not expecting to fall, but if he does, that would be an amazing pickup for Washington at 18.
This was a guy some people were maybe saying that he can go number 6. We really don't know with a guy like Derek Queen. I mean, if Kasparis Yakuchonis is there at 18 and you're going for upside, I wouldn't mind taking a player like him. But even a guy like Liam McNeely or Jace Richardson, they're great three-point shooters. And then if the Wizards are able to acquire another first-round pick, I mean, I wouldn't hate the idea of going after a guy like Walter Clayton Jr. I mean, how bad could he be considering he was the number 1 player on the best team in college? My ideal route, I'm going Ace Bailey, and then I'm going Derek Queen as well. But again, trying to also be realistic, I think Liam McNeely from my very own UConn Huskies could also be another realistic option who could fit what Washington is trying to do. Matthew Heiserman, thank you so much for joining us today. Links to all of Matthew's work are in the description. And folks, enjoy the NBA draft. Me and Matthew are both in person, though, doing this from different rooms. We're going to enjoy the draft together here at Play-by-Play Camps in Villanova, Pennsylvania. Matthew, thanks again. All right, we're going to wrap this one up here. Signing off. I'm your host, Chase Coburn from Wiz Talk with Chase, where once again, here in the NBA draft, the Wizards look to add another franchise cornerstone to a core that they're hoping to build off of in free agency next summer after Jordan Poole's trade.